Hi there and welcome. You are listening to The Hoof of the Horse, a podcast dedicated to farriery and equine science with Dr. Simon Curtis.
I've come up to Glasgow for the Scottish Vet and Farrier Conference, and it's been organised for 10 years by Jim and Alan Ferrie. So I'm sitting here with Jim and we're going to discuss his life as a farrier. Jim, when did you first start shoeing horses?
I first started in 1969. I was 14 and there was virtually no horses to shoe in the 60s with us. Horse was very much a pleasure industry, and it was the days before the indoor arenas became vogue. All we had in our area was hunting in the winter and some local shows in the summer. So riding schools weren't really in vogue, and my dad was a salesman for a dairy chemical company. And one day a farmer said he was only getting the sales of his bulk milk tank if he shod his Clydesdale foal for the Coylton show. So he came home and said to me to draw his tools out the garage, and there was an old hand-turned forge, and I was mesmerised. I watched him make the foal shoes for this Clydesdale foal, and then I went with him when he put them on, and I thought, I think I'd like to do this. Before that I wanted to be a vet, and as it transpires I spent so long shoeing horses in my years when I should have been studying for my A-levels that I never got the grades to get into vet school anyway. So as it transpires, I've been teaching at Glasgow for 44 years at the vet school.
So you made it to the university?
I made it through the university through another module, yeah.
And you didn't just do an apprenticeship with your father then, you went off with another local farrier?
Yeah, 2 days a week. I went to college to learn welding on a Monday, and then I went 2 days a week to a local farrier called Bob Marshall, whose father used to go to the shearing competition with my grandfather in the 30s and 40s. I worked with him for 2 days a week, and then my father was still shoeing only part-time, and then when he came, we worked all weekend putting the shoes on that we made through the week. So we did that for till 70. Well, Alan, my brother, he left school in 74, and then the three of us started shoeing horses full-time then.
And so by then there was enough horses?
There was enough horses.
And
the first indoor arena had sprung up, a place called Muir Mill near Symington in Ayrshire. So that meant people could have horses and could ride all the year round, and it was a great thing.
So then that was a development of more sports horses, was it?
Sports horses, yeah. Show jumping became vogue. The local shows were still a big thing. We got a lot of our work through being farriers at the local county shows. My dad still, at that time, had kept a dairy engineering business, and my focus was in farriery. Alan was in farriery, but he was in the young farmers, and he liked a lot of the dairy engineering stuff. And we fitted bulk milk tanks and made cubicles, feed barriers, kitted out farm sheds, and we had our iron in many fires at that time. We had my sister's brother was a heating and ducting engineer, and so there was a local factory, and we had the maintenance contract for that as well. So we had quite a big business
and quite a wide variety.
Back in, that was through 78 to 85, and then milk quotas came in and killed the dairy engineering. We used to get our full year's work at Ayr Show for 4 or 5 years. We'd get all the orders and we'd struggle to fill them in the year. Shoeing horses in between, but milk quotas came in and farmers stopped expanding, and a lot of them actually were going out of business. So we had to diversify. So at that point, 82, we started Farrier Supplies, and Alan and I channeled our interest into farriery and Farrier Supplies. We took on our first apprentice, who, as you know, will be Sandy Beveridge.
Yeah.
And Sandy's the only apprentice we've had that's ever taken his fellowship. We've had a few that have got their associate, but Sandy was our first, and arguably we've had two that have won the World Championship, but Sandy, I would think, as an advocate for the craft and what he's done for the company, would be our best, I would think.
Yeah. Well, I've certainly had one fellow now, Mark Trussler, but I've never had a world champion. I've had I've had a number of apprentices that I'm very proud of,
Yeah, absolutely.
but I certainly can't match that. And it's always struck me that Scotland, because I think there's probably less farriers than people realise in Scotland, but you have a very high number of extremely skillful and knowledgeable farriers, don't you? I get the impression that there's a higher concentration here.
There seems to be, at one time, there was more fellows in Scotland than there were anywhere else.
That's what I think, yeah.
Because sadly some of them are no longer with us, but now there seems to be a drive. I know it was my peers, guys called like Jock Scott, and he was one of my teachers when I went to college for 2 weeks in 1977 before taking my RSS, and that was my college years. So that's all I did. I went for 2 because I wasn't sure about anatomy, physiology, and Jock Scott was really, really good, and he dropped for 2 weeks. He just drummed the anatomy of the lower leg, and I made sure I could answer all the questions in Holmes's book, Charles Holmes's book, for the RSS, and I was really proud. I passed my RSS with honours in 1977,
Yeah.
and then I did my associate in '79, and I got honours in the theory, and I just missed honours in the practical. And my fellowship, I didn't pass the practical the first time, and I got honours in my theory, and there was some dubiety about the practical, but anyway.
You can't still be arguing about it now.
Still arguing about it.
And of course,
All these
I
years.
know when you passed your fellowship, because that's when I first met you, the evening before.
That was right, yeah. I
In
split my trousers.
1983. Yeah, and as you know, what always impressed me about you is that you were under as much pressure as me. You were doing your fellowship, I was doing my diploma, and yet you spent an hour with me going through it. So that was the start of a long friendship. You've probably forgotten that, but I
haven't. I remember Shona and I meeting you, and I saw your hands, and I looked at them, and they were exactly the same as mine. I said to Shona, my late wife, that's a farrier over there.
Yeah.
And we started chatting.
Yeah.
It has
So
been a
that-
long time. It's
19-
1982.
I think it's March 83, but
March 83. That's right.
so that's long time going, and we're a similar age, although you started a couple of years before me, and you've always stayed a couple of years ahead of me throughout our careers. Okay, so why did you decide to take the associate and then the fellowship? What drove you? What was the motivation?
My grandfather had his associate. He was an AFCL, and he took it in 1928, I think. And my gran was alive at that time, and she was going to go and do your associate and be the same as your grandfather. I'd be so proud if you did that. And so that's why I did it. And she died just a year after that, but she saw me get my associate.
Oh,
So once I got that, I became driven to do the fellowship. And so luckily, because I was working at the vet school here, I had access to anatomy department and access to lecturers, and that really motivate me and help me. So they helped me a lot. I did my thesis on laminitis, and they helped me collate a lot of the figures and other stuff I needed for my fellowship. And I just pushed myself and got it. And because I got it, Alan, my brother, who was 4 years younger, he was determined he was getting his, and he I don't think he's been beaten yet. He was the youngest to get his
Ever
fellowship.
fellow.
Yeah. Mac Head, I think, was the youngest before him.
Okay.
And
So were you both under 30, weren't you? When you...
oh yeah. I was 28 and Alan was 26 and a half, I think.
Yeah, well, I was pleased to get it at 31, but so we were all relatively young, and of course there was this thought, I think then, where people used to say, oh, you had to be 50 or something to get a fellowship, and that seems to have been broken now.
I think so.
And we've had a lot of young, really vigorous fellows in the last few years.
I think what getting my fellow, it wasn't the actual getting it that helped me. I think it was the fact that once I got it, it opened doors to information that I wouldn't otherwise have got. You know, I got to meet people through the Worstful Company, through vets, through being asked to do lectures, and I learned way more having achieved my fellowship than ever I did in the years before it, because I got access to different information. And as the cliche is, every day is a school day, and even today I learn something. you know, and the day you stop in this craft learning is the day you should just hang up your apron and give up.
Well, just for those listening, we've just come out of Jim's lecture here at the conference to make this podcast, and you know, a wonderful lecture as always on the hind leg and the hind foot. And what I really like about the fact is that you've developed this over the years. I've seen you develop it. You've written in corrective farriery, and of course, too many people seem to treat the horse as if it's just two front legs.
Okay.
And I think one of the things you've done is you keep pulling together this knowledge and guidance to us about shoeing the hind end, that's what drives the horse over the jumps, or if you're in racing, what drives the horse over the winning line.
Yeah, it's so often misunderstood and left because the cliche is, it's only 30% of the, or 33% of the body's in the back half, but it's actually, as you rightly say, it's the propulsion, and without propulsion you get no impulsion, so it's fundamental.
So let's move on to competitions, because they've been quite a highlight of your life. Just tell me how you got into competitions and where it all took you.
I got into competitions because my father competed at the Highland Show. The Highland Show used to travel around the various towns of Scotland back in the 50s. Well, before that, but my father went to Aberdeen in 54 and he won the Apprentices at the Highland Show in 54. So when we started up again in it took till about 1972, 73, and then my father, there was a competition at Dumfries, and my father went and competed, and Alan and I, we struck him, they called it strikers, we heated the steel for him, and he placed, just his first competition he placed, and so that gave us the bug, and Alan and I competed in the Apprentices, and Alan, my brother, is always been a better forger than me, and even to this day his passion is making beautiful shoes, and we've not gone in different directions, but mine is fixing cripples, as I call it. You know, I seem to have a talent for helping lame horses, and so is he, but his passion has always been shoemaking, and so when we do clinics, we do different clinics. He'll do a clinic on forging and I'll do a clinic on mechanics and how the horse moves, travels, and how I fix it. But we've both got our different skill sets, but and we both recognise that in each other. And it's never really been
a complementary skill sets.
So, regards to the competitions, we just tried, because we had the Farrier supply business, partly I wanted to keep us high profile, because we developed our own range of shoes and tools and nails, and we tried to sell them all over the world, but we found that it was very much a niche market. We found that our market was very much UK for what we had to offer. So after 4 or 5 years of trying to break America and things like that, we discovered that we'd just concentrate in the UK. So we made our Farrier supply business UK, but then we got the chance to be GE agents for Europe. So that opened up different doors to us, and especially, you know, when the EU as it was, you know, there was virtually no trade barriers in any of these countries, so we could ship stuff. And it would get there the next day, 2 days, to the different outlets in Europe. And we were the European GE forge and tool distributors. And that opened a lot of different doors, and we're very grateful to Bob and Debbie Garner for that opportunity for 20-something years.
Hi everyone, I just wanted to take a quick moment to interrupt and let you know that Simon's new book and his other textbooks are available in retailers, online and around the world. If you would like to find the best place for you to buy your copy, please go to our website curtisfarrierbooks.com. From there, you can choose to buy the book directly from us, or if you'd rather, look on our international suppliers page to find the best shop for you to buy from. If you have any problems, you can just give us an email at sjcurtisbooks@gmail.com and I'll be happy to help. And as of this week, you can now buy Simon's books on amazon.com and amazon.co.uk. I'll now let you get back to your podcast. Enjoy.
So let me just bring you back to competitions, because your actual competition at your forge at Newmilns became huge, didn't it? So if you tell us something about that.
Yeah, Alan and I started it. There was only 3 competitions in Scotland at the time, and we thought we could do with another one. And because we'd travelled to we hadn't travelled at that point. Dave Wilson and Edward Martin had travelled to the convention, and they were telling us all about different competitions in America, and so we thought we should run one. So we started one called the Ayrshire branch. It was Ayrshire branch. Those days it was Nappy. There was only 11 people at the first one in 1978, and then we held a meal in a local hotel with the competition, and it was shoemaking for the apprentices and shoeing and hunter, caulk and wedge, hunter fit in front, concave, and heel and feather it was, as the Scottish version of caulk and wedge behind. So my ambition was to, our national farrier here is a chap called Dave Wilson, and Dave had won the Highland Show at that point 11 times, and he was virtually untouchable. And so in my early years, my aspiration was to beat Dave Wilson. My first aspiration was to get a prize, but then once I got a second or a third somewhere, I wanted to win. But more than that, I wanted to not because I wanted to be better than Dave Wilson. I just knew that if I managed to beat him in a competition, my standard would be high. I held him in such high esteem. And 1982 was the first and probably the only time I beat Dave Wilson in a shearing competition. And we're great friends, and we went to the World Championship started in Calgary in 19, I think it was 82. It started, and then it became known about internationally in 84. Carl Bettison and Grant Moon and Dave Wilson all went there in 84, and it gave Alan and I the bug to do it. So 85 was my first year, and Dave and I went together and we practiced together, and there was a lot of two-man team stuff, and we won 4 out of the 5 two-man team contests, and he won the World Championship, and I made the top 10, and I was so proud. And my late wife Shona and I, we met a lady there called Florence, and she was like a second mother to her, so that was our holiday for 22 years. Every year we
22
went,
years.
22 years we went, and I practiced. The only month I never made shoes was December. So I practiced for the convention. I start practicing usually first week at holiday time, January.
Yeah.
And I start practicing for the convention. The convention would come usually end of February, and then I'd practice for the international local team trials, international team trials, and then I'd practice for our Scottish competitions and Highland Show, and then Calgary would be going in the background. Then I'd go to Calgary, and then it'd be international in August, and then the competition. Sometimes I'd go to Hose in October, and then the Army one in November, and my whole life just revolved around shearing competitions.
And of course, that competition became huge, and it was part of J&A Ferry. But you've just sold or moved on, and it's now Handmade Shoes Scotland, isn't it?
Yeah.
So has that freed up time in your life?
It's given me time to, yes. Now Alan and I we're still business partners, but we don't have any employees at all between us. We live 80 miles apart, which is hard, but it was my choice. I've got a fishing business in Perth, and I've got a holiday let business in Perth, and I needed to be nearer these. So I left Ayrshire 6 years ago and moved to Perthshire. So I commute down, and we've still got shared yards that we meet twice or 3 times in 6 weeks, and we still see socially and on the phone most days. But I miss our daily contact. There's no doubt about that. But he comes up and we fish together up in Perthshire, and we do a bit of pheasant shooting, and so we still see each other a bit.
And fishing's a big part of your life, isn't it?
It's quite a huge part, yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen you give a talk, and I've seen you lots of times where you don't put a picture up of you and a good-looking fish.
Fish, yeah. Well, I do enjoy fishing, and I enjoy fly casting, and I do a lot of fly casting. Salmon fly it's quite an art, and some people chill out by doing other things. I actually go for lessons by some of my mentors and get taught how to fly cast with what they call spear rod, and I actually teach.
I know
people.
So you also you do that as a business.
As a business, yeah. I've got 2 miles of the River Tay with a business partner, and I'm a guide on the River Tay. I take people out in boats and try and catch them a salmon.
Right. Now, on a slightly different subject, you and I both examine for the Worshipful Company of Farriers, but I think you are now the most senior examiner, aren't you?
I think so. By it seems to go by who got on there
survived
first.
the longest.
Yeah, who survived the longest. Yeah. I don't think it's anything to do with ability, but we seem to be there, and I'm still quite passionate about it. And the company are taking it. The company are standing firm in their standards, and I've always admired that about the company. I was chairman of the exam board for 4 years, which is a year longer than I should have done, and I enjoyed my time there. I enjoyed my time in the Worshipful Company court while I was chairman, and I miss my real mentor and friend Dennis Oliver. Sadly passed this year, and I do miss Dennis. I must admit, he's worldly wise.
I'll show you I showed you briefly the digital copy of my latest book, The Hoof of the Horse, but I didn't show you that it is dedicated to Dennis Oliver.
No, you never.
I'll show you that once we finish this
cool.
this interview. Yes, because I felt the same way about Dennis. Yeah. He did more for farriery and the company and the exams than anybody, by a long way.
Well, he examined me for my fellowship, and when I passed, he shook my hand and he says, "We'd really like you to become more involved in the company. You are exactly the type of person that this Worshipful Company needs." And I thought, he's only met me, very briefly. I'd never met him before, and I thought, how can he know that about me? But I made it a point of joining the livery, and I'm very proud to be a liveryman. And I could never. I've had the opportunity to go onto the court and be master, but financially, number one, I couldn't afford it because of the time away. You've been master, and there is a financial commitment, but there's also the time commitment. Yeah. And I just never had a year in my life that I could dedicate to.
Well, I always thought it was a pity that you didn't stay on and go on, but that's life. Back to the exam. So you've been examining, must be 30 years, and from the time zone we've sort of talked. 33, there you are. And what are the sort of changes, the main changes that you've seen?
I think the main changes that I've seen, when I started examining, we had the first failures. I think that ever happened in exams. And it wasn't the standard was going down, it was just that there was a generation of examiners that were quite happy to just, he's all right, but we had standards, and the company at that point, as they do today, started setting the standard. I was aware of this when we just started, and I was a probationary examiner. And then when I examined, there was 2 failures at Hereford, which was virtually unheard of. And the tutor was up in arms that 2 of his boys hadn't passed, and it was all the examiner's fault. We only examined what we saw in front of them. And that seemed to be just then 2 people failing that exam, and there seems to be now, it's not that they fail, it's that they don't achieve the standard, and that's become the norm nowadays, thankfully. For the welfare of the horse, we set the standards of the exams, and we as a body, because we do our standard setting days and everybody's in the same sheet, I think our examination standards are second to none, and those that fail to achieve our standards, whether it be an associate, whether it be fellowship, or more fundamentally diploma, I think that they shouldn't pass. They shouldn't be given a license to practice until they've achieved the standards that we set, and they do.
And I know, just like me, all examiners hate to fail somebody, don't they?
Oh, we do.
You love to see a good job and award high marks.
Yeah,
so it's always agonising when you fail somebody, and there's a lot of discussion before.
Absolutely, and we're very conscious, even, and this is not breaking our confidence, at the exam standard setting day, we have different opinions, and that's the beauty of the standard setting day, and we're all conscious of bending over backwards to give shoe boards or give jobs the benefit of the doubt before we would ever hit that fail button. But once we hit the red button, I'm afraid
Yeah, we stand by it.
We stand by it, and everybody, does stand by it. But we do anything but hit the red button. But we're also very conscious of the welfare of the horse, and you can't let people out there that can't practice.
Yeah, I mean, and I always think at the higher level exams that we actually have a duty as well, because all the people that passed the exam before, what are we saying to them if we reduce the standard?
Exactly.
So our main duty is to maintain standards.
And it's maintaining standards, and we've altered the exams, and some people call it dumbing down, but what we're, I think, improved the standard by making the just two, a front and a back.
This is at the
bar
associate
shoe at
level.
the associate level, yeah. I think it's a straight bar front and hind with different modifications, so they don't have to turn up wondering if they're getting a curb shoe, a graduated bar shoe, a half heart bar, or whatever.
Yeah.
They still have to force them to make sure they've got the shoe board right. But I'd rather see them do a good standard of work on the feet.
I think on the basis that anybody that can make a bar shoe well and fit it correctly can by and large do every farrier job.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I'm with you on that one, and we had to fight a little bit of a battle over that, but it was won in the end. All right, I'm going to hit you with the deep philosophical question now. So, what I'd like you to tell me, Jim, is what's the most important thing that you've learned during your life?
That is a deep and philosophical question. It's probably cliched, but it's to take each day as it comes and enjoy it, because sadly I lost my wife 20 years ago, and I was going through life, a pair of us, she had just actually retired at age 40 from the civil service, and we were about to enjoy our latter whatever many years after that, with me still working and travel and do stuff, and sadly cancer hit her and took her. So that made me grab life, and that's why people see me fishing and doing a lot of the stuff that can I afford it? Probably not, but I'm going to do it while I'm still fit enough to do it. So that's enjoy life while you can, because it.
Well, that's excellent advice. Jim, it's been fantastic speaking to you. Lots of information, and so I'm really grateful for the invite up here to speak, but also for the chance to interview you for this podcast. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
You can follow more of Simon's work on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. To get in contact, email thehoofofthehorse@gmail.com, or if you're interested in Simon's books, please go to curtisfarrierbooks.com. Thanks for listening.